hold out for a few more days. The network would cave. She just knew it. She took a deep breath and lowered her headset. "Are you trying to derail my entire process?" "You just looked like you needed my help keeping this little guy steady." Trey reached up to touch Fangley. Nobody touched Elsie's puppet. She flicked her wrist so Fangley's hand smacked Trey's forehead before he had the chance. He blinked at her, but made no move to call the authorities. So hitting someone annoying with a puppet technically wasn't assault, just as she'd suspected. Rebecca, the showrunner, poked her head through the studio door and called Trey over. Elsie felt the tension drain out of her. Even Fangley's shoulders relaxed. Elsie used the momentary peace to ready herself for the scene they were filming that afternoon, the one where Fangley and his cat sidekick Ratatouille put on way too much makeup in an attempt to fit in. The beautiful thing about the show was that its connection to reality could be tenuous as long as the bits were engaging. For example, why would a blue-tinted young vampire like Fangley and his Maine Coon sidekick think doing a full clown face of makeup would make them less conspicuous? Either way, she was looking forward to the arrival of Gabby, Ratatouille's handler. The Fangley universe worked on a perfect kind of logic. Very little of it. Fangley Heights was in its third year of production. Most days Elsie couldn't believe her luck. She had picked essentially the most unemployable major, despite her father's desire for her to do something respectable. What he really meant was something with a high earning potential. Her father saw money as a down payment toward happiness, but he always forgot about the mortgage. Elsie had found no correlation between respectability and the size of her bank account. Quite the opposite, really. Besides, she literally couldn't do math or handle bills. Even calculating tips was beyond her. On the other hand, the idea of saving people made something catch in her chest. So business and medicine were out. Her father wanted her to be employable. She wanted to be happy. But on Fangley Heights, most days, she was both. Now if only everyone she'd ever met would stop making weird jokes about her being a puppeteer. At the very least, bad jokes should be original. But there wouldn't be a job, puppeteer or otherwise, if she couldn't get next season's agreement worked out. With each contractless day, she barreled closer to an uncertain future. She'd pushed her luck in negotiations, but why shouldn't she be better compensated? Fangley was her intellectual property, even if Haelstrom Media owned the trademark. Though it felt hard to say where everything would land with that in light of Hunter Haelstrom's recent passing. That little vamp went all the way back to a web series she'd done to kill the time she should have spent memorizing Hamlet in grad school. A little something productive to assuage her guilt over wasting time. Her classmates tried to dismiss children's television as fluff, but this wasn't Punch and Judy Hour. Fangley Heights had depth. It had whimsy with slightly charred edges. It only barely made sense. It was a show about an orphan vampire being fostered by a family in Brooklyn, a true American story. When Haelstrom Media had reached out to her just before graduation, she couldn't believe her luck. Elsie had felt so sure signing that contract would be her golden ticket, but she was young and naive. She didn't understand subclauses and percentages, or that one paragraph they always threw in that stipulated media appearance requirements. Maybe they'd learned their lesson after her season 1 sponsor disaster. She wished now she'd read that contract, committed every line to memory. Been asked to do a series of complicated crosswords before signing it, but she hadn't, because this was back when she still trusted people to do the right thing. She thought she'd pay off her loans, buy an apartment, and stop worrying about getting by. And yet they were wrapping up season 3, and she was still sharing a place with Avery. Treating themselves meant the fancy 2-for-1 egg roll special. Elsie was struggling, even though her character was a cultural icon to kids everywhere who were still learning to tie their shoelaces. Fangley was a celebrity, if a puppet could be a celeb. What was she saying? Of course a puppet could be famous. Oscar the Grouch? Rizzo? Iconic? Plus, as a 9-year-old vampire desperate to fit in, Fangley was relatable. For the pun-filled Makeover Done episode, Elsie had spent a solid week working with their local designer and props team on Drag Fangley, as she'd been thinking of him. He looked almost frightening this way.